Fine. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. Oh, Clinton, every time he get caught with his pants down, bombs away over Baghdad. You know, killed over 500,000 Iraqi children under the age of 5 with the sanctions. Oh, and how about Obama? Assad has to go of Syria. Gaddafi has to go, Libya. But only Putin's the war criminal. So you join the club, join the war criminal club. So tell me, what's going on out there? What do you see? And give us a background of the beginning of this and where you think it's going.
Well, I have been covering this and everything leading up to it now for the last several months. I visited the Donbass region for 1 full month in 2019, which is that part of eastern Ukraine that separated after the coup. And I made several films showing the destruction and declaring and showing mass graves where in that period of 2014 and 15, 14,000 innocent civilians were bombed and shelled. It was horrific. I felt on the one hand like crying, I was emotional, and on the other hand, I was so angry to see what was happening to these people that had been organized, funded, and directed by the United States in the person of one Joseph Biden when he was vice president, and he was Clinton's man in Ukraine, in Kiev. And so I've been following this for a long time. Now, what I understand is happening now, right now, in Ukraine with this intervention by the Russians is that they have been very deliberate in avoiding the killing of civilians. And that's why this has gone so slow. They have surrounded cities and created what they call a cauldron, where nothing goes in and nothing goes out except humanitarian corridors. They've been accused, the Russians have been accused, and I'm sure you're aware of this, of bombing a maternity hospital, which was fabricated, bombing a theater, which was fabricated, and other atrocities, which the neo-Nazis, and I don't use neo anymore, I just call them Nazis. They're direct descendants of the Nazis of 1940 to 1945. So the Russians have been using artillery, hypersonic guided missiles to destroy strategic command centers, military bases, other military infrastructure, radar, etc. And so I follow this every day. Many times of the day, I'm watching the maps of what the Russians are doing, and they're basically taking back a lot of territory, and they've also surrounded Kiev with one humanitarian corridor leading out. So the largest city, Mariupol, on the Azov Sea, has been held by the Azov neo-Nazi battalion. That city, the Russians and the defense forces from the Donetsk People Republic have entered the city, control everything around it, and have the Nazis basically contained in a steel mill, a large steel mill. And it's not going to be a matter of time. It may have even happened already, or it surely will happen very soon, that they will be eliminated. And then the focus will be on Kiev. Now, Russia's purposes are threefold for this intervention. One is to demilitarize the Ukrainian military to stop them from killing people in the eastern part of Ukraine, Donbass, because it's continued ever since 2015. So they're going to demilitarize the Ukrainian army. The second thing that Russia declared was their objective is to denazify the country. That doesn't just mean these battalions like Aidar and Nazov. It's politicians who are the heads of neo-Nazi parties and their Rada, their parliament. It's to go after all of the leaders of these Nazi organizations and gangs, as well as the previous presidents of Ukraine, including Zelensky. And the third objective of the Russians is to ensure that Ukraine becomes a neutral, sovereign, independent state, never ever to join NATO. And what this means is that Russia will install a new government and will oversee the rewriting of the Constitution to include this neutrality proclamation. So that's what's happening in the combat zone and why the Russians are there.
Now, what is the news that, well, just before I go on to that, you said you were there in 2019 in Donbass. Were they still, were the Ukrainians still bombing into Donbass back then?
Every single day back then and since then, including this very day, there are strongholds that are still artillery still shelling parts of Donetsk and Lugansk. And I know you had a very good friend of mine, Russell Texas Bentley, on your show a week or so ago, who I'm sure gave you the update on just exactly what's happening there.
But when you were there, did you see it happening?
No. There were a couple of days when you could hear artillery in the distance. What I was focusing on was trying to interview journalists, interview military personnel, and interview people who have been living in those bombed out areas along the front. That was my focus, to try to show this emotional story about what's happened to people, little old grandmothers who are living with this terror every single day. So that was my purpose for going there.
Now, what is the news coverage coming out of Russia regarding what's going on in the war?
You know, Gerald,